Welcome to our presentation titled Microbit, a pathway to physical computing in Python in the K-12 classroom. Your presenters today will be Christine Yang, Belinda, Adrienne Pankratz, and Ricardo Ruiz. Hello, my name is Christine Yang, and I will start the presentation with the introduction. The closure of schools in 2020 due to COVID-19 highlighted a long-standing disparity between student groups and citizens across the country. It also highlighted another issue that even educators may have overlooked in the past, which is the lack of accessibility and knowledge needed to navigate computer applications. Computer science has the potential to bridge the gap that was heavily exacerbated by the pandemic. Today, we are going to be looking at how physical computing using things like BBC's microbit can help build a pathway to higher level languages, and in our case, Python. There has been a long-standing disparity of underrepresented minority groups and women in the STEM fields, both in education and the workforce. According to the 2021 Pew Research Center's report by Fry et al., despite the growth of jobs in the STEM fields, workers that were Black and Hispanic and women in non-health-related fields continue to be underrepresented in STEM occupations as compared to the percentage they represented in the workforce as a whole. The data from 2018 highlights the disparity between minority groups in various STEM fields, even as STEM occupations tended to have higher wages compared to other occupations, creating a gap in representation and ultimately the opportunity for wealth as relative to the population at large. The trend continues to higher education according to the research by Fry. There is a positive correlation between STEM occupations and STEM education, especially those that hold a bachelor's degree or higher. According to this research, there is little shift in the diversity of students that hold STEM degrees, even though there has been a dramatic growth in the number of STEM graduates from U.S. colleges and universities at all degree levels. While women represent a higher percentage at about 50% in STEM occupations, this is generally due to a high representation in the health-related jobs at 74%. Women continue to be underrepresented in the physical and computer sciences, accounting for about 25% in computer-related occupations, 15% as engineers and architects, 40% as physical scientists, and 47% involved in mathematical work. This is in comparison to white male workers make up about 67% in the STEM workforce while making up 63% of the workforce across all fields. The disparity does not stop at education. Wages earned point to disparity related to gaps in pay based on gender and ethnicity. According to Fry, women in STEM tend to earn less than men across all ethnicities, and the gender pay gap in STEM is wider than in the broader labor market, which was about 80% in 2019. The STEM gender pay gap had a wider distribution at the top than at the middle or bottom by 2010, and Blue's research strongly suggests that discrimination cannot be discounted. This increases the barriers and compounding the effects for minority women. Minority workers tended to earn less than their white counterparts, with the exception of Asian men and women, but there was still a gender pay gap between the two. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the already present disparities for underrepresented minority groups in the education system. In a paper written by Salcioli defines the term learning loss as declining student achievement in periods when students are out of school. Before the pandemic, this learning loss was associated with what students forgot during summer vacation or other breaks in instruction, which was commonly studied and documented. There seems to be a higher susceptibility in gaps of math knowledge, but reading achievement gaps were also significant. According to Salcioli, the difference between this previously seen learning loss and what students experienced during the pandemic was that before, learning loss referred to what students learned, mastered, and then forgot, while the impact of COVID-19 was a question of whether or not students engaged in the content to begin with, and then if they were able to master the grade level content. Due to the differences, he refers to the COVID-19 phenomenon as learning disruptions. This was exacerbated due to uneven access to distance learning due to an array of social, economic, and technological factors, including in-person instructions. Nationally, in grades 3 through 8 that were studied, schools with mostly students of color started with only a 59% math learning gains from the previous year, as opposed to 67% that was expected before the pandemic. In another paper, Bethauser stressed that COVID-19 learning deficit is likely to affect children's life chances through their education and labor market prospects. This highlights the negative impact that is pronounced for students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, often associated with minority groups in the U.S. Even 2 years after the pandemic, there seems to be a persistence of learning deficits and a need for a variety of methods to help reduce the gap in learning and increase the retention of student progress, not only towards academic success, but also for success in the work field. COVID-19 has also brought to light the importance of being able to navigate through the use of technology and computational systems. Teachers had to learn and quickly how to teach online using programs that they had minimal knowledge or training in, like Zoom. Students had to adapt to learning online and learn to navigate programs just like the teacher had to. The lack of reliable internet and access to technology, compounded with students not having the access to adequate learning environments or even food and shelter, exacerbated the problem and made it almost impossible for certain students to learn. According to Kerr et al., around 15 million public school students did not have access to the internet at the beginning of the pandemic. This gap was especially pronounced in low-income, Black, and Hispanic households. Students without access to the internet could not learn the new computational tools, and online systems were less likely to be successful, while students with available resources and support were more likely to have learning gains during this time. The Chaffee Joint Union High School District is the second largest high school district in California, servicing about 24,000 students. There are 8 comprehensive high schools and other alternative high schools and programs, including online high school and adult school. At the comprehensive high schools, there are 16 computer science teachers servicing 63 sections of computer science courses. The authors of this paper represent 2 schools in the district, Chaffee High School and Montclair High School. And of the 2 sites, about 90% of the student population is Black or Hispanic, with 84% and 79% who fall under the socioeconomically disadvantaged subgroup, respectively. According to the School Accountability Report Card, there are 6,100 students between Chaffee High School and Montclair High Schools, with 6 computer science teachers servicing 9 sections of computer science courses. A survey of 31 math, science, and computer science teachers at the 2 sites, Montclair High School and Chaffee High School, revealed teacher observations regarding student skills as it relates to computational thinking, problem solving, and grit. Out of those who responded, almost 42% disagreed or strongly disagreed with the statement, students are able to perform computational thinking, with 38% reporting neutral and 36% agreed. For the statement, students have critical thinking skills necessary for solving problems, 52% reported disagree or strongly disagree, while 32% reported neutral and 16% agreed. For the statement, students are able to come up with alternative solutions when they can't solve a problem, for example, grit, 66% disagreed or strongly disagreed, with 23% being neutral and 13% agreed or strongly agreed. In our district, there is a specific need to address the lack of skills regarding computational thinking, problem solving, and grit. Accounting for the demographics of the students of the district and the needs seen by teachers, specifically targeting underrepresented subgroups to be successful in STEM and especially in computer science needs to be intentional. Bridging the gap of teacher preparation and student readiness, physical computing devices like the BBC's microbit help to support students and teachers by providing hands-on experience from the more abstract computer science principles in coding to application that can be seen immediately. Microbit provides a natural progression from the block coding that students learn in elementary levels of computer science, whether it is in elementary school, middle school, or high school, to the more advanced languages like Python, which require higher degrees of computational thinking, problem solving, and perseverance. Exposure and working knowledge of computer programming languages like Python can help students bridge the gap that currently exists between underrepresented minority workers in the STEM work field, especially in the computer sciences. Computer science has the potential to bridge the gap between the disparities currently in place, which will help students prepare for their future. In an increasingly digital world, there is an increasing need for competent workers in computer science. By helping students prepare to be digitally literate and solve problems through computational thinking, students can enter the workforce having the necessary skills to be successful in whichever field they choose to enter. Exposing students early and often to not only use technology, but to create and program allows them to experience computational thinking and problem solving, a skill that can be applied in any field, but especially in the areas of STEM and specifically computer science. Early exposure to block coding and creating simple programs, and then successive exposure to higher level programming languages and more complex programming like Python can create a pathway for students that are underrepresented in computer science to see themselves in an area where they are currently not equally represented.
My name is Belinda, and I will be discussing what is a microbit. Many people believe that the microbit is just a simple microcontroller. But in fact, the microbit is much more than that. It is a small, pocket-sized computer that can be coded and customized and controlled by school-age children. It is a learning tool that helps children start coding in a fun and easy environment. The single board computer is 4 centimeters by 5 centimeters. In the picture below, you can see there is an example of a microbit. Let's look at the hardware of a microbit. The hardware of a microbit has the following peripherals. It has the Bluetooth. The Bluetooth allows the microbit to communicate wirelessly with other microbit devices, and also it can communicate with Android-based smartphones and tablets. It has a low-level radio. It has 2 front buttons. The 2 front buttons allow the students to program either long presses, short presses, or both presses. There is a back button. The back button is a reset button. There is a 5x5 array of LED. There is a motion sensor. There is an input-output pins, USB connector. For version 1 and version 2, those peripherals exist on both. For version 2 of the microbit has a speaker and has a microphone, whereas version 1 does not. In the pictures to the right, you can see an example of a version 2 microbit. The microbit also has USB connectors that allow you to charge or connect to a 3-volt battery. Let's look into what the microbit can do. The microbit can be programmed to sense, measure, and log light, temperature, sound, movement, and magnetism. The microbit helps children explore and learn about buttons, LED, radio, networks, simple circuits, and pins. The microbit can be programmed to light up the LED and display a beating heart, dancing animals. It can display games such as tic-tac-toe. It can also be programmed to be a compass, but it has to be calibrated first. It can be an alarm. It can sense light. It can sense motion. It can be programmed to be a pedometer. It can be programmed to sense the strength of light. Where does a student find code? Well, there are two types of coding at microbit.org. Microbit.org has MakeCode, which is founded by Microsoft, and it's a block-based coding. The block-based coding is for younger students. Some students go as young as 7, and it is for beginners. Microbit.org also has a Python editor. The Python editor at microbit.org is a text-based programming tool, and this tool is for the more advanced or the older programming student. Another resource for programming is code.org. That is also a Python editor that helps students program their microbit using a text-based programming tool. Some of the benefits of microbit.org and code.org are that there are lessons and guides provided to help students program the microbit. There are step-by-step guides between block-based and Python coding that allow the student to be able to code their microbit. Another benefit of the microbit is that the teacher does not need to have any knowledge of physics or electronics. Almost everything needed is embedded into the system of the microbit, so the teacher does not need to know circuits or electronics. There are lessons for all ages of students. Some go as young as 7 years old, all the way to the adults. There are levels starting at the beginner level and range through intermediate and range all the way to advanced level programming. The microbit is a very fun piece of equipment that allow the student to begin and learn programming, get excited about programming, and dive deeper into programming so that there is more computer science for all students.
Hi, my name is Adrienne Pankratz, and I'm from Chaffey High School where I teach forensic science and robotics. In this segment, we're going to be taking off with microbit and exploring 3 popular platforms for accessing microbit curriculum, which can be found at code.org, Microsoft MakeCode, and Python Editor. Let's get started. Teachers wishing to get started with code.org can go to code.org, appropriately named, and from the home page, they're going to be able to click on the Teach tab, which we'll find up here. That Teach tab is going to open up to a link where a page is going to kind of tell you the whys of teaching computer science in the classroom. That can include really any type of curriculum. So that's a great place to start, really place to get inspired. And then what's going to happen next is you're going to scroll down to the bottom of that page where you're going to look for this purple button, Explore the Curriculum Catalog. And from here, you're going to be taken to this menu with a plethora of activities, subject matter, and lesson plans that you can incorporate into your classroom. When we unpack the teacher resources with code.org, once we've clicked on that curriculum menu, we're going to see really over 20 different curriculum options that people can use. We are focusing on microbit. So we have creating apps with devices, which is microbit. Code.org also offers another device interaction, which is called creating apps with devices. And that one is through Adafruit Circuit Playground. Very similar microprocessor with similar capabilities. But we're going to go ahead and explore the microbit one, as that one has a lot more scaffolding through the other two platforms that we discussed. So once you've clicked here, you're going to click on Quick View just to kind of see what's there for you. If you like what you can see, you can click Assign at any time, and that's going to assign it to the class that you've developed in code.org's classroom option. So once we go ahead and click on Quick View, we're going to be taken to kind of a outline of all the different things that we're going to find in the unit for creating apps with microbit. We'll click here on See Curriculum Details, and we'll be taken over here to some teacher resources. We're going to see that we can find code, all resource standards, content standards to incorporate into your lesson planning, all the vocabulary for that unit. There's guides to assessments. Code.org does offer formative and summative assessments in the form of multiple choice tests, as well as projects where students can kind of explore their creativity and show their teacher that they understand the code in a creative and new way. We'll look at values and philosophy, different videos, and of course debugging, which is huge. If you look here, you're going to see that there's options to have lesson plans. One huge resource that code.org offers are slide decks. So these are pre-made slide decks that have videos incorporated into them. We'll see activity guides. They do provide student exemplars and answer keys and project rubrics. So really, code.org is a one-stop shop for everything you're going to need to incorporate your microbit into your classroom. One of my favorite features that is available on code.org is going to be your pacing guide. So once you pull up your unit menu, you'll have the option to do a weekly lesson layout. In the upper center area here, you're going to see you can set your minutes per week that you want to allot to your code.org microbit. And in my case, I do teach a robotics class, so I did allocate 225 minutes, which is about a 50-minute class period per day. And what we see here is we have a nice breakdown of how that's going to look in my classroom. So each one of these squares represents one day or one lesson. Larger squares, they will anticipate that a student doing a mini project where students are more creative may take 2 days. And then, of course, if they're doing a larger summative assessment, then we might see something that takes up to a week. Depending on your student's coding background, these are pretty accurate. I know with my students, we have less coding pre-experience, and so a lot of times my students may take a day and a half to 2 days on certain projects, longer than what's suggested by code.org. And again, that's just because of the fact that most of my students do not come in with coding backgrounds. I'm not going to go too much into this because I know my partner Ricardo Ruiz will be touching a base on this, but these are your individual lesson plan overviews, which are phenomenal because they offer you a minute-by-minute play-by-play of what your class is going to look like for that period. And in those minute-by-minute playbacks, they're going to have everything from agendas. There's your standards right here. We have activities. They tell you how many minutes to allocate towards that, wrap up, etc. They also offer lists of what the teacher needs to prepare and things like that. Slide decks are phenomenal. They are clear, concise. They contain all of the vocabulary. And one option I really do like about them is they also show the students the code that they expect to see. So you can do some whole class discussion embedded into your direct instruction. And then they also provide student handouts, rubrics, etc. So code.org, like I said, it really has everything you're going to need from start to finish to get your kids up and running with the microbit. In comparison, we have Microsoft Make Code. The website here, similar, is makecode.microbit.org. You'll see that up here with that hashtag. Some differences here. For MakeCode, students sign in can be done through Microsoft, Google, or Clever accounts, but students also can access the curriculum without creating an account, which is nice if you have blockers on your district accounts. Down here, students have the option of choosing your projects. So if you just want to have some time where students can get in there and kind of experiment with things they're curious about, then you can allow them to choose any project here. These projects are designed to be completed within one class period or about an hour, sometimes two, depending on the project. But if you want a more in-depth exposure where it's more defined in terms of variables, vocabulary definitions, inputs, outputs, things of that nature, then you might want to do the 6 pre-made lessons that are created by MakeCode. In here, a little bit more like code.org, they will have more of a structured experience inside of those projects. But unlike code.org, where it's very scripted, very linear in its pathway with the introduction, direct instruction, whole class discussion, and then a guided practice, which is very structured in its application. Microsoft MakeCode allows students to be more exploratory and allow them to make mistakes. They will get to an end product or an end output on their microbit. Sometimes students may not know how they got there, but there is a review session or a summary that allows them to attach the vocabulary to the learned skill. So it's kind of a backwards way of learning it, where they complete a task and then they go back and assign the vocabulary to the functions, the actions, the outputs, the variables that they inputted. Unlike code.org, MakeCode does not offer dashboards for student grades, or do they house a student grade book, but they do have a teacher dashboard. And so once you get into this step 3, which you get coding and start teaching, one amazing thing that I found with MakeCode is that teachers can go into their dashboard and they can see exactly where the student is struggling. They can share code with the student. They can edit code from their desktop, which is a nice feature that's not allowed in code.org. Once you get to that getting started page, you're going to notice that microbit make code is going to do a 4-step process. It's an introduction, quick 2-minute video. You're going to power up with your microbit, your USB. You can use a computer or a tablet. You're going to get coding pretty quickly. What is the coding language in this platform? It's going to be Python. Students who don't have that Python background do have the ability to do block coding. There is Scratch, and then there's even JavaScript through the text editor. That's different than in code.org, which uses JavaScript. Actually, predominantly throughout code.org, you're going to see JavaScript, and then you would have to use a code editor to change that over to Python. So a little different there. Lastly, when you start teaching, you're going to have your 6 introductory lessons, and that's going to be more of that guided practice for both teacher and student, or you can just go. Say, choose a project, kids, and let's go. Some MakeCode features. We're going to see that what do you need to get started? Well, you're going to need your microbit, of course. You're going to need a battery pack, especially if you decide that you're going to do some physical computing. There is applications where you can do some minor robotics, attaching servos, small motors. Of course, there's the sensors that come on board with the microbit, which include things like temperature, moisture, light sensing. Now they have a voice record option. And then you're going to need your battery pack with your 2 AAA batteries. Okay, so that's going to get you started. Once you get into the microbit classroom, like I said before, they don't have a grade book per se, but they do have a platform where you can monitor student progress. And like I said, you can help edit code and you can share code. So if a student is asking for a particular type of project, you can say, hey, you know what? I've got the code for that. Let me go ahead and insert it for you. Code can be saved by you and the student for future review. You can save an entire session that you've had with your class, which is a great thing to have. You can have students save their own work through Microsoft Word, which allows them to use their code and to edit their code outside of the program, which is a nice feature because on code.org, you can only edit that code through code.org. And so having this ability to be able to download and then save your code is nice because then students can work on it from home. The 6 lessons that they allow you to choose from are going to be the name badge, the beating heart, the emotion badge, a step counter, a nightlight, and rock, paper, scissors. And if you do choose to do the 6 lesson unit, they do recommend you go in this order. Reason being is that the code does increase in complexity as you go through the different projects. So in, maybe single variable to multivariable, and then as it goes through, you're going to be using sensors and things like that. So they do ask that you guys go through that. But if you choose to just pick one, like let's say I just want to go straight to the emotion badge, can I do that? Absolutely. I would just pick that from my menu. Speaking of the menu, you can choose your projects and go. So if you say, you know what, I've only got maybe 2 days to spend on this, can I still incorporate microbit? Absolutely. You can maybe do, let's say you're a science teacher and you want to do a temperature or you want to do a moisture sensor. You can go ahead and do something like that. You go to your menu, choose a project, and then your students will be guided through a tutorial. Most of these tutorials can be completed in a single class period or maybe 1 or 2 days. And so you're able to just focus on that particular skill while incorporating the microbit and of course your subject matter curriculum. So it's a nice way to incorporate computer science into the classroom without having to do a full computer science unit. Some of the differences in learning, students may not get that in-depth code definition, code identification, debugging skill set, but they're definitely going to get introduced and curiosity is going to be sparked. So it's a great place to start if you just want to incorporate some simple computer science in there and then incorporate it into your normal curriculum. Our last platform is going to be Python Editor. And with this one, it's exactly what you see is what you get. The minute you type in that python.microbit.org, you are taken to this home page. So there's no fancy home pages, no fancy teacher resources, no pre-made lesson plans. It is a text editor. So you're going to have your code editor here up and running. You do have some reference code or pre-written code that is going to be embedded to all of the programs. And this code here is going to allow you to partner with your microbit with your computer and kind of get it up and running. So it's going to prepare that microbit for receiving of the code. And then below that, students can then go ahead and change their code to whatever they may want. So we see here, this one's got display image as a heart. It has pulse rate and things like that. They can display a scroll of hello. This Python editor is really going to require that your student has more than a general or a novice grasp at Python editing. It does not allow for that block coding that you saw in code.org, or it doesn't allow for that block coding that existed in MakeCode. So this is straight microbit Python coding. What if the student doesn't have all their codes? There is a reference section. So if a student pulls up that reference section, they can do drag and drop code. So if they kind of input what they think, I need a variable. There is a menu for that. So when you actually press on that reference, it'll kind of list different variables, functions, outputs, inputs, loops, what their function is going to be, and their expected outcome. So students can go ahead and drag and drop into the code. If students decide to type their code in, what'll happen is it'll highlight it in certain colors. So we see highlighting occurring here. And if the code is incorrect, it'll highlight it in kind of a red color. It will also provide drop-down menus as the students are typing with some common code that a student may decide to use. And so it'll have a quick drop-down menu. Students can highlight the one they want and then press enter, and then it'll go ahead and include that into the line code. If students don't have that capability, maybe they are familiar with Python, but they're not just creative just yet. You do have some projects that are similar to what was in code.org and what was in MakeCode. However, one drawback I found with this is that if I click on that emotion badge, it's going to drop the code in exactly as it is. It's not going to allow me to have any debugging. It's not going to allow me to really explore. It is just the code. So what I'll see is I will get a definite 100% function from my microbit, my output function. However, I may as a student not understand how I got there. So for that reason, it's good for the students, I think, to get excited, but it might be something where you want to work backwards. Say, okay, kiddos, you know what? This is what it's going to look like. How did we get there? Explain the code to me. And again, you have the motion badge step counter. So very similar to the projects that were found in MakeCode. Within the simulator here that you're going to see on the right, so in our Python editor, and actually in all of our platforms, you're going to have a microbit simulator. So in MakeCode and in the Python editor, your simulator is going to appear in your upper right-hand corner. Students will then be allowed to manipulate these virtual buttons. So we have button A and button B here. We have various LEDs going on, and we have here connectors. So once we get to circuitry, students can use alligator clips to learn basic circuits. Once students have developed their code, they can go ahead and hit the play button, and that's going to run their code. First, it'll go through and run the code on the virtual one. And if students like what they see, they can then go ahead and hit the upload button, which will import that code into the actual microbit. And then students will get that expected output on their physical device. So it's a pretty cool app here. Some teachers have asked me, well, why do they have the virtual? Why can't we just upload it? Depending on your district's server and regulations, I know some districts only allow 25 uploads to a server or to a microbit. And so this allows students to test the code without wasting those uploads. And so I know once they get a little further on, and especially in robotics, they really do need to test this out frequently in order to get their expected outcomes. And so this is a huge time saver for your students.
Hello, my name is Ricardo Ruiz, and I will be discussing the lesson plans as well as the implementation in the classroom while using microbit. As my colleague Adrienne previously discussed, there are three main platforms while using microbit. The first is code.org, followed by MakeCode and Python Editor. Each has its own method for implementation and approach to lesson delivery. We will first begin by unpacking the lesson provided to us by code.org. As you can see, there are four main parts to the lesson plan. We will specifically look at lesson number 3, introducing the microbit, from the Creating Apps with Devices unit. Lesson 3, introducing the microbit. As you can see, this is a thoroughly developed lesson with a multitude of resources. Code.org provides an overview, which is what will be done in the lesson. This is followed by alignment to the standards, in this case the CSTA K-12 computer science standards, hitting on algorithms and programming as well as computing systems. Next, teachers are provided with a minute-by-minute breakdown of the lesson, which is useful for planning and pacing out the unit. In the center, we can see the objectives, which allow teachers to set goals for student learning. This is followed by preparation and links. Preparation is anything that the teachers need to prep for prior to the delivery of the lesson, and the links often provide slides to show students as well as any resources they might need throughout the lesson. The teaching guide is the most relevant and fleshed out portion. This provides teachers with speaker notes, any guided questions they should ask their students, as well as any transitions they need to anticipate throughout the lesson. This particular lesson is broken down into 3 portions: the warm-up, the levels, and the wrap-up. In the warm-up, students are given an opportunity to share background knowledge and are tasked with a question of the day. In this example, it is how can I control the main output on the BBC microbit? Next, students move through different levels such as predicting, skill building, and practice. As they move on, they can find also some challenge levels should they need additional practice. And lastly, there is a wrap-up portion. Students are shown a discussion question, and teachers are provided with the goals of that discussion question and an opportunity for the reflection and journaling by students. As you can see, code.org does an excellent job of providing step-by-step lessons with a multitude of resources for teachers. Now we will dive into the MakeCode lesson. MakeCode can also be broken down into 4 main elements. MakeCode provides short courses for educators to gain knowledge. Each course has supporting materials for both teachers as well as students. Let's take a look at the lesson more closely. Here we can see a course overview as well as resources to support the course. In the course overview, you can see the 6 projects that are explored in this course. In this case, we will dive in to the name badge project. The resources provide introduction videos as well as any tutorials that students might need. Lastly, and most importantly, is the lesson breakdown. On the lesson breakdown, you can see they use a think, create, evaluate, extend, and share model. This walks teachers through the lesson. Lesson 1, the name badge, follows this model. As you can see, it is more hands-on, project-driven, and with a quick outcome. It still provides students with opportunities for scaffolding, self-driven exploration, and personalization. Teachers can elect to walk their students through this, or they can decide to let them build it on their own. Again, it is vastly different from the step-by-step model provided by code.org, and in this case, it is project and inquiry driven. Our final platform is the Python editor. Again, this platform provides a short course for teachers to progress through. It includes video and course materials, why the Python editor was developed, how it supports creativity and debugging, and the wrap-up to the course. Although not a true lesson plan, as it is designed to support creativity and exploration by implementation. The Python editor provides two main portions: a reference content, ideas tab, a simulator, and an autocomplete function. All these are meant, again, to drive exploration by experimentation. Should students encounter any issues, there are some debugging features, such as reference code snippets, syntax errors that are highlighted with a red dot, an import microbit library, the simulator to test their code, an autocomplete function to pick existing code options and avoid any typing errors, and a code structure that is highlighted should they make any mistakes. Finally, let's compare our three options for implementing the microbit in the classroom. Code.org is a step-by-step implementation model where curriculum is sequential with pre-made lessons, units, pacing calendars, assessments, and gradebooks. It utilizes JavaScript as its initial coding language. It is block-based coding, particularly to help those beginning students. Additionally, it provides teacher professional development and a code.org classroom where teachers can monitor student progress. Make Code is more of a tutorial-based implementation model, where students are provided with 6 pre-made lessons that expose them to microbit and computing concepts. The ready-made projects allow students to jump right in. It too utilizes block-based coding, although students have the option to toggle between JavaScript or Python if they feel proficient. It also provides a microbit classroom where teachers can monitor student progress. Lastly, we have our Python editor. It is a self-guided implementation model. It provides some resources such as references, section of code that can be dragged and dropped, pre-written code that is initiated into every program, suggestions that appear as a drop-down menu, and ready-made programs that are also available for students to get started with. Now that we have looked at 3 variant models and lessons, it is up to each educator to take into account their own pedagogical styles and experiences to determine what is best for their own skill level and the skill level of their students. Our team would like to thank you and hope you have gained valuable insight into utilizing the microbit platform.